So let's talk about points and hafting points. This is a notch on the end of a bamboo arrow that I've been working on. And we're talking about true arrow points, stone points. We're looking at, stuff about like that. Now, with this notch, when you're carving the notch in, sometimes I will start it and actually use an arrowhead itself, another one that I have, to start that. The tendency is, when using a stone tool, is to have this real flared out up at the top, which isn't really what you want. You want to try to avoid that. So I like a tool that's somewhat like this. The straighter this edge is, the better, but that's just a flake tool. And I like to come in and use it right like this. So what I'm trying to do is not like waller this out real bad. The reason being, especially with a point like a bone point, okay? The bone points are very parallel width-wise. So if you're setting a bone point, even if you have your pine pitch and stuff in there, what you gotta watch is this top being wallered out, because you get a lot of wiggle, right? So having a lot of that wiggle in the top up here is a problem. Okay, so bone tends to have that problem more. So the ways around that can be having it thinner down on the bottom of the notch, and also when you grind the bone point, grind the base narrower, okay? Or you can grind in a bifurcate. So this is a stone point that has a bifurcated base. Okay, so I use that initially when I'm shaping the stone tool. I'll start with a flake to make the point, and I will start with the thinner end, and I'll shape my base first. So I know I'm gonna have a good thin base to half down in there, okay? So some of these points have straight bases like that. Some of them have bifurcated bases like this. The straight point will sit down in there and seat well, and it seats, all the way down. It'll fit better one way than the other. Straighter, I mean, most of the time. So you can pitch glue that up, and that's tight. I mean, that dude's in there now. It's not going anywhere. And the stone is gonna naturally, because of the way you're flaking it down here, okay, it flares out. So a stone point is not as parallel. The nice thing about having a bifurcated base, or a point that's just barely slightly bifurcated on these triangle type arrow points, it's an advantage, I think, for setting it in, because your shaft is gonna seat a little bit higher on the point and give you a little bit more stability, right? And then you get a little bit more stability also side to side because of the shape of that bifurcation, right? And also when you're sawing the notch in, you have a tendency to be lower on the outsides and higher in this middle point. So for those triangle points, the bifurcation works really good. You can do the exact same thing with the bone. You just have to grind in a bifurcated base. And you see some of those on some of the bone cahokia points. Same thing with the garfish scale point, having a triangular point. The garfish scales seem to seat really well, right? And those make good practice points. They're very durable. So that seats down well. So all these, within reason, are fairly interchangeable in the same slot. You just have a slightly different shape inside here. And the real tricky ones to mount are the bone points, because the sides are so parallel. They don't have a tendency to flare upwards in thickness from the base like the stone points do. And that creates a challenge, especially when you're notching out to mount your point. So you want to use a very skinny tool and take your time and only take out as much space as what you really need to. And then, you know, this is probably going to be a little too big. Yeah, it's not going to seat all the way. But, you know, test fit your point, test fit it, and only take out. You want that to stay, once you have your point in there, without even having it pitch glued, you want that fit to be straight. The phone's going off. And you want it to be tight. And this could be taken down more. It's heavy now, but I'm just using it, you know. You want this transition to be as seamless as possible. And this shaft extending up the point this way gives you more rigidity as far as the play back and forth. It just makes for a really solid way to haft and to mount your primitive point. So when you're making your stone point, just remember to start shaping. I like to start shaping my base at first, and to use the thinnest side of the flake as my base. And then as I'm taking more material out of up here, it will naturally thin out.